Hey, nobody's out there, right? Anyway, I'm just talking. I'm talking my thoughts because no one wants to talk to me right now. Anyway, so I'm just thinking out loud. Isn't anybody else? I guess people have very different like mindsets. But I always think like, isn't anybody else obsessed with dominance? What's dominance? I don't know totally what dominance. Just let me talk about dominance for a while. I listened to Jocko podcast a long time ago. I started listening to Jocko podcast and Joe Rogan podcast, and I started to become fascinated with this idea of dominance. What is dominance? It's like, I guess it's like who gets affected by who, like who's revolving around who influences who. And I'm like always like obsessed with that. When I was younger, I didn't really pay attention to that stuff, but now that I'm paying attention to that stuff, I'm just really fascinated with it. And I wonder if like it's an older person thing. Like I wonder if it's something that older people get more preoccupied with, or maybe it came from steroids. I took steroids a long time ago, and ever since then I've been obsessed with like, don't get influenced by other people. Like don't get hung up on like their, if you're dancing to somebody else's tune, that's, I think most people don't think that way. I think it's probably like some sort of low life like guys in prison think about this kind of shit. But I kind of wish I didn't think about this because it seems like it's not conducive to like, it seems like it's probably good to be flexible, but at the same time you don't want to like let other people like dictate what's right in your life and stuff. And so anyway, for the last 7 years I've been sort of obsessed with dominance, and in some ways it's been really good because it makes sure that I control my own time. Like it seems like it's very closely related to discipline. Like if I don't have any friends at all, I can just lay the groundwork for my life. And so I started doing this live streaming thing and making these videos, and I realized that if I just never communicate with anybody, I have complete dominance, because if anybody engages in my videos, they can only be affected by me. I cannot be affected by them. But at the same time, it's kind of like it seems like it's kind of a lonely existence. It's kind of like, well, if I just always do that, then I can never deal with people, because people are not they're not gonna do everything that you say. And so I'm like, shit, like, so I don't know how to explain it, but basically for the last 7 years, I've been sort of obsessed with like, don't let people influence you. Like I try not to be swayed by anything, and it's been pretty good. But it's been good for like controlling my time. But now all of a sudden I'm just like, I should like mix in some human interaction. But I don't know how to do it quite yet, because when I was younger, before I knew about all this shit, I used to just get like stuck in other people's stuff. Like I used to always get like pushed around by someone would say like, oh, why don't you come to my thing, and like, why don't you you should do this, or life is really about this. And I would just be like, oh, okay, you tell me what to do. And I would get like swayed by other people's stuff. And so at some point, like maybe like 12 years ago, I started to notice like, oh, like you can just say no. You can like be rigid and be like, I'm gonna do what I want, and like you can like, I will not be swayed. And so I've been like a little too like that. Like 4 years ago or something, when I was taking like steroids, I was obsessed with it. I was like, nothing shall sway me. And it's weird. It's kind of like it's a weird mindset. Like if I just think about like, there's me and there's everything else that's not me, and it's just me against everything else that's not me, and I have to control my life and not get swayed by the everything else that's not me. It's kind of a good, you can get really disciplined that way. And so I think I got a lot of this from like Jocko podcast. I listened to Jocko podcast, and he's all about like, you're not gonna fucking like sway me. He's like, don't get dominated. And so anyway, what's your point? It's weird. It's a thing that really fascinates me. I feel like a lot of it is basically my own psychology, and it's almost like superstitious stuff. Like it's weird. Like even just talking with, I talked with this guy this morning for 5 minutes, and the whole rest of my day was kind of like different. It's like I'm opening, I don't know how to explain it. In my brain, I'm opening a portal to like other people's influence, and I get paranoid about that. Like, oh, they're gonna like sway me. Their influence is gonna like knock me off course. And so it's kind of ridiculous. It's weird. Is it weird? I really have nothing to lose. Like I think like, well, if there's any time to do stuff like this, it's really now, because right now I'm really disillusioned with this art stuff. I'm just kind of like, well, I've done so much of this art stuff where it's like I can like throw another like 200 hours at a painting, but it's just kind of like I did like a lot of paintings. I can do like another anyway, I feel like there's this thing that's coming. There's this thing, artificial intelligence, that's coming, and I can connect the dots in my head, and I'm just like, they're gonna have this thing called agentic AI, which is basically like agents. There's gonna be like virtual people that you can sort of talk to, and that thing is gonna enable me to like dance with humans. Like I've avoided human interaction my whole life. I've never had some sort of like nerdy systematic way to like get over my fear of humans. And so I'd love to just, I feel like in the coming years that will be something that I could do, even if I can't like arrange back and forth interaction with a human. I could I can eventually do it with bots. Like when they have these agentic AI things, I can talk with bots, and I can be like, oh, like I can learn how to like deal with humans. This is my theory. My theory is basically that like human interaction, it's like jujitsu. Like I'm doing jujitsu. I found out I can engage with humans physically, if we're not talking, I can engage with humans physically, and I can do different moves. And so my theory is that like if I talk with humans in face-to-face interaction, it's a little like jiu-jitsu. I don't want to think of it as like an adversarial thing, but it's just similar in the sense that like somebody's going to do something chaotic, and I have to like dance with that. I have to be like, all right, what am I going to do? And if I practice it, maybe I can find like moves. All of this, you can just, I love this AI stuff, because you can sort of ask these things on ChatGPT. This is a little Joe Rogan inspired. Joe Rogan, I really like Joe Rogan podcast. Joe Rogan, he kind of did jujitsu, and then he did these sort of podcasts where he frames the podcast as sort of like round 2, round 3, and it makes it seem like it's some sort of combative thing. I don't want to think of it as a combative thing, but it definitely is a fear thing. Like I really am sort of like terrified of eye contact. Actually, let's just do this. No one's listening, right? As long as I'm just sitting here, no one should watch this. But I'd like to just, I feel like I can just write out what exactly I'm afraid of. Yeah, basically like, I don't want to be perceived negatively. I don't want to be perceived negatively, then perceive myself negatively. Like that's, when I used to engage with people, what would happen is, even if somebody doesn't mean it, somebody's gonna like be like, oh, you're some like simpleton, or they're gonna say like, you're like, they're gonna look at me like, oh, you're like retarded, or they're gonna treat me like, oh, you poor baby, you're stupid or something. And so I'm gonna think like, oh, they perceive me as a stupid person, and then I'm gonna be like, oh, I guess I'm stupid, and then I'm gonna feel like I have to act like a stupid person for like the next 2 weeks. I'll just be like, who am I to do smart stuff? They see me as I guess I'm some stupid person. That's one of my fears. What else? I don't want to get bullied, and I don't want to bully somebody else. So I also interpret that as like, I don't want to assert superior. I don't want to assert superiority. I don't want I don't want to feel weak. I don't want to feel weak and dominated. What does that mean? This is just something I'm kind of a little obsessed with this, but like, get to the point, Sean. Just when I do improv acting, I'll notice this in improv acting. Like, even though we're improv acting, when I do my little improv acting class, there'll be this thing where like somebody just naturally will say something in conversation, like, oh, like, so where you living? Like, you living at your dad's house? And they're kind of saying like, you live at your dad's house, you're like not good. They're gonna say like, oh, like, so how old are you? And they're basically saying like, you're an old guy. And they'll say like, oh, what kind of job do you have? And they're gonna say like, you're unemployed. They're gonna like knock me down, and they're gonna be like, I'm better and stuff. And so I'm always like terrified of that. I shouldn't really care anymore. Like, that's the thing, is like doing jujitsu, it just makes me realize like, yeah, people are gonna try to like assert superiority, and they're not gonna kill me. It's kind of like fine, but It's just kind of bothersome that you always wonder, like, why do people always have to do that? Like, why can't people just you know what I kind of wonder is, like, does someone always have to do people always have to vie for superiority? That's kind of what I wonder. If two men interact, if two men have a conversation, do they always have to somehow psychologically sort out who's superior? Or is it possible to just have a neutral conversation where they realize that they both have strengths and weaknesses, and they're not absolutely better. Each person is better in different ways. Is that possible? Yes or no?
Yes, it's absolutely possible for two men to have a neutral conversation without feeling the need to establish superiority.
Okay, so that's what I want to do. That's what I want to do. Is I want to have a conversation where I'm not trying to like defend myself and try to establish superiority. I feel like it's almost like a knee-jerk reaction. Is I'm going to do some sort of I don't want to do that. I'll catch myself. I'll watch some video and I'll be like, oh, I was sort of doing that, like, subconsciously. What's the point? Basically, I just don't want to worry about that. But really, like, I don't want to play some, like, the part of some deferential person the whole time either. Like, if I just make videos and I never engage with anybody, I always have the superior position because somebody is just watching me. They can't influence me. I can only influence them. But it's kind of like a limited way to... I mean, I can do that, but then I can just never talk to anybody. So that's what I'm trying to figure out. Is like... So basically, I should say ChatGPT says... Two humans, we'll say two humans, can talk neutrally. They can talk neutrally without asserting superiority. Just for the record, like, I never understood this stuff until my 30s. Like, I always used to just deal with, like, adults, and adults would just go, like, let me tell you, like, this is what you do, and, like, you're so, like, you got to do this, and I'd go, like, tell me and stuff, and I would just always be in this deferential position where I just felt like if I dealt with people, I just let them do everything, and I felt like, well, that kind of sucks, because then you just feel like powerless. And so, what's the point? I'm paranoid. I'm paranoid that carries over to the rest of life. Like, I'm paranoid that if I feel deferential, the rest of my day, I'm, like, out of control. I feel like I can't... Like, this is my weird paranoid philosophy. This probably is, like, some superstition. My paranoid philosophy is that, like, if I feel out of control in comparison to another person, when I try to, like, control myself and do, like, come on, we got to get disciplined, we got to do some push-ups, my body says, why should I listen to you? You can't even control yourself. Like, this other person was bossing you around. You're not the boss of yourself. You can't even control yourself when confronting this other person. And then my body's like, why should I take orders from you? You let this other person boss you around. Now let's see. Now this is kind of like craziness. So I should just ask this. I should say, so I'm going to tell us, this is some superstition. Is there any psychological data to back the idea that if you are bossed around by, like, another person in conversation or something like that, like, after that conversation, if you felt really powerless, you'll feel less disciplined in your day-to-day life. Like, you'll find it hard to get a grip and, like, do, like, a lot of exercise or do something that requires a lot of discipline, almost as though your body is like, I feel like this other person was the boss of me, and so I can't control myself as well. Is there any data to substantiate that if you are too deferential in your conversations, you'll kind of, like, have less self-control after the conversation?
Yes. There's some psychological data that supports the idea that feeling powerless in a conversation can impact self-control later on.
See, I've noticed that. So there is data to actually show that. So it seems like I noticed that. Like, if I just completely be totally deferential, it's like when I try to do things later in the day, my body's like, psh, why should I listen to you? My body won't listen to me. My body's like, you're not the boss of yourself. This other person is, like, bossing around. Like, my body's like, why should I listen to you? You don't even control yourself. This other person control. It seems crazy, but it seems to work. Nobody's listening, right? I get like really like nuts about this stuff. I'm trying to be less nuts about it, but like it even happened with like my neighbor. Like my neighbor, she did this thing where like when I first moved in over here at my dad's house, she would like say like, you need to put your dog on a leash and you need to put your dog in a muzzle. And I used to just go, oh, I'm sorry, you do that. And I just felt like when I walked by her house, I would feel scared. Like I felt like I couldn't control myself because she would be like, you sit down when you pee. And I was like, I'm sorry, she has control of me. And then eventually I realized like there's no law making me like put a muzzle on my dog. And so then when I was walking by her house, when she said like put a muzzle on your dog, I just didn't do it. And when I exercised my freedom not to do it, I felt so much more disciplined. It's like, oh, I'm free. I didn't feel like this terrified feeling, and I felt like I could go running and I had like more discipline because I was like, oh, like I can like control myself. This other person doesn't like control me. It's a weird thing, but in my own brain it kind of works that way. Anyway, so what is it? I don't want to feel bullied. I don't want to feel spurred. ChatGPT says if you feel powerless or cannot assert power in conversation, it can in fact carry over to your life later. I noticed that like if I get out of control with some people, I'll be like, fuck, I can't like control myself later. It's a weird thing, but I think you can probably get over that, right? But people can get over it, right? They can get control of themselves afterwards, right? Of course.
Yes, absolutely.
But that's one of my fears too. I'm trying to break down my fears. What else? What are my fears? Struggling to uphold good perception of myself that just allows me to try my best. Yeah, that's what I mean. Is like, if I feel like I'm a bad thing, then I don't try as hard. It's kind of like if somebody's like, oh, you're bad. If I'm like bad in comparison, I feel like I'm bad. And then they might say like, oh, you're like, they might treat me like I'm some idiot. And then I'll be like, I guess I'm an idiot. And then I don't even try to do smart stuff. And so, what's your point? I don't know. I think that if that's a thing, then I should just, I think reading my spiel in the morning should get over that. It's weird. Does that make sense? I don't know quite how to like make sense of this, but like I just feel like I feel like there's streams. I don't know how to explain it. This is my own craziness. I'm just gonna say maybe I can root out craziness with this thing. I feel like there's streams of influence, and if you get influenced by some other person, their stream is gonna like knock your stream off course, and you'll be like, fuck, like I'm all like out of whack, and it's probably crazy. I wonder though, is there data to substantiate the idea that if you live mostly in isolation, you can kind of control the stream of your consciousness and your actions and stuff like that? But if you start to deal with other people in conversation, their influence can like affect your thoughts or your stream. Like you can get like knocked off course. You can lose your discipline and be like, oh, like this person's influence has knocked me off my course. Is that like a real phenomenon, or is that just hocus pocus? Is that superstition?
Yes, there's some psychological data to support the idea that social interaction can significantly influence our thoughts and behaviors. Here's how. Social influence, conformity, We often unconsciously adjust our behavior to fit in with the group, even if we don't consciously agree. Social comparison. We constantly compare ourselves to others.
Right, so those are the fears, is like, oh, I'm going to seem like I'm this compared to this other person, and then like I'm going to feel like I'm this thing, and I'm going to be like, wait a minute, like I don't have to play the part of that thing. That's one of the fears. What else? Yeah, I don't want to adopt their worldview or feel like I should do stuff like they do stuff. That's a big concern. It's like, I guess what I have to do is that in the morning I'll just read my spiel and I'll be like, I'm free to do whatever I want to do, and I don't have to fit in. It's just I should always recalibrate. Like, what do I want to do? And I think if I just play Simon, if I play Simon afterwards, if I play Simon after and read spiel, morning, I think it's fine. Yeah, I'll go with that. I'll take it from there. If my life gets totally out of control, I'll just adjust. Whew.